Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to episode 9 of season 14 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown, and this is the only weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Okay, before we kick this week's episode off, I just want to say thanks to everyone for the kind words on social media. So I don't really suffer from anxiety or mental health issues generally, but like everyone, there are some things that can trigger that and can get on top of me. And there was something that came up a little while ago, about a week and a half ago, that's been causing me some sleepless nights, or restless nights at least. I'm being so tired, I didn't really have the creative energy I need to do justice to these songs. As most of you are probably aware, I do script these episodes, and I go off script at times, and you'll almost always be able to tell when. But for the most part, everything's written out. So being creatively exhausted, I didn't think it was a good idea to try and phone it in or put out something that I knew I wasn't going to be happy with. So thanks again for being patient and supportive. You're all wonderful people. But I'm back now, and I think I'm okay now. So the last poll for Big Weekend came back as positive as expected. Actually, maybe a little more positive even. 60% of you sided with me and gave it a top tier 10 out of 10, with the other 40% placing it in the 7 to 9 range. So I was very happy with that result. As I said in the episode, Big Weekend is one of my very favourite Petty deep cuts, and I don't know how anyone could possibly listen to that song without having a gigantic grin on their face. Okay, so let's check out some social media. Over on Instagram, the wonderful Lisa Kelly Pennington was responding to my musing about tattoos, as well as my ruminations about English and Canadian slang, and she wrote, "If you don't run, you rust" is such a great line, and I'm all for tattoos. I fully support this idea. What interesting sayings. I got to work with some Aussies for a few weeks about 8 years ago, and remember them using the phrase, "We're not here to fuck spiders," for not wasting time, and it'll just randomly pop into my head now and then. Now, I'll tell you, Lisa, I hate spiders. Hate them. I know they're a vital part of any ecosystem and largely do a lot of good work. I know they're not malicious or dangerous or in any way harmful to humans for the most part, but when I look at them, every cell in my body screams, "Run! Run now!" It's why I know I'll never visit Australia, though, I'd love to see Sydney Harbour Bridge and the MCG in principle. I just cannot handle the thought of huntsman spiders. Ugh. Lisa finished up by saying, "I think you definitely gave this one away in the beginning. Guessing 10 was easy. 5 and 2. So she's guessed 5 correctly out of the 7 songs that we've done so far. Over on Facebook, I'd been having a conversation with Annette about how to pronounce her last name, and we decided that we'd stick to just her first name. So first of all, it avoids any complicated linguistics, and secondly, it lends her an appropriate air of mystery that all mononymic enigmas enjoy. Anyway, Annette wrote, "I love Big Weekend. What an underrated song. One of those that seem to have existed forever. Brilliant lyrics, beautiful melody, a typical Tom to make a ditty like that a great piece of art." And isn't that the truth? It's a seemingly effortless thing, and yet, a whole lot of patience and time went into its creation. Janet Massa Lovell simply said, "I'll say it again, Big Weekend is my Tom Petty weekend anthem." To which, Janet, I would reply that every band who opens the Tom Petty weekend should be required to play it by law. And maybe that's something Dan Speece could get the Gainesville Council to pass as some sort of, bylaw or something. My pal Dallas Helica simply wrote, "Kick up the dust." And I didn't talk much about that line, but it's another absolute cracker, isn't it? 4 words that describe so many different ideas all at once. Connie Clevenger Withers commented, "For some reason, his lyrics that mention colours always stand out to me. A favourite is green and grey and auburn sliding down the sky from I'm Going Back. I love the use of auburn. So creative. And yeah, colours are very visually evocative, aren't they? I've always loved Golden Brown by the Stranglers. I don't usually have songs that remind me as strongly of specific seasons, but that song is 100% a fall song for me." Chris Nestoridis wrote, "One of those songs you can easily turn a casual or non-fan onto as an example of a catchy but not well-known outside of Tom's core fan base song." And I definitely agree with that one, Chris, and have in fact done exactly that on more than one occasion. The lovely Nora Haywood Olsen replied, "One of my favourite songs by TP. I love the high energy intro. To me, it sounds like the wheels of a train or car chugging along to bring you to somewhere you're excited to go, perhaps visiting a faraway friend. The song brings a sense of anticipation and excitement that are not necessarily found in the more reflective tunes on the album. You can look back, but it's best not to stare is a saying I have frequently used in meetings. If you don't run, you rust is one of my life's philosophies. Earlier, we talked about time being a theme of this album, and I think that last line is saying, even if you're middle-aged, move and be excited about life. Be curious about the changes this time of your life means. At least that's what it's saying to me. And I couldn't agree more with this, Nora. I think that curiosity is one of the most undervalued characteristics that we have as human beings. Kids have it in spades until we metaphorically beat it out of them in school by training them to approach problems in a set, prescribed way. But I think it is important to keep moving forward, and this song is a great reminder of that philosophy. My executive producer, Paul Roberts, writes, love the slide guitar or whatever it is on this one. The demo is good. The guitar makes it for me. It's a 10. Yeah, the guitars on this track are multi-layered in an incredibly satisfying way and are completely and unmistakably Jeff Lynne sounding. Along with that chugging quality to the intro that Nora mentioned, it's why I always think this one might be the most Wilburys-esque track that Tom ever wrote after Volume 3 came out. Rich Gibson writes, great work, Kev. Thanks, Rich. I started typing before listening as I was playing the song first, as advised. Compared to the demo version, the harmony verse vocal, Mike's lead and rhythm guitars, and a slight slowing of pace absolutely make this song. Tom lost the melodic Dylan-esque harmonica from the demo version and double-tracking lead vocal, which I think was unnecessary. I think the acoustic guitar mix is a little dense and murky for me to decipher, but you'd normally capo and overdub acoustic to change tone and inversion, so he might be capoed at 5 playing an A for that second part. I totally agree that this is very Wilbury-esque, like Rattled. Mike's solo being long and going through verse and chorus is great. Lots of 12-string in the solo, so Mike is aping the vocal melody with overdubs coming in and out. So, there we go. Hey, I love it. I've said it before. I love it when guitar players chime in with what they're hearing. So thanks as always for that, Rich. And I should ask, so maybe drop me a note in the comments, have you ever done this one live? Have you ever covered this one live, Rich, with your band? Last but no means least, my other executive producer, Steve Ursel, writes, immediate Johnny Cash vibes for me on this song. I think it's mainly that wonderful bouncing bass line. Good episode, once again making me think about the lyrics more than I had. And I fully agree, if you don't run, you rust is a great line. Deeper than you might expect from what is essentially a fun little number, but that's Tom for you. I like this song a lot. I'm not going above an 8 at the moment, but seeing the outpouring of affection for this song, I suspect this one will grow on me even more over time. And you know what, Steve? I suspect it will. It's one that you'll go back to because it's just so much fun. It's easy to listen to. Okay, well, thanks for all your feedback as always, folks. We had a big weekend, but now, after a very long day, we've got to pack our things back into the trunk and hit the highway again with this week's song, Night Driver. In conversations with Tom Petty, Tom tells author Paul Zollo about recording with Jeff Lynne, saying, I was lucky, I didn't really struggle a lot with these songs, and Night Driver was the first song we did. It was like, hey, we should record something. So we went over to his place with Mike, and we recorded that, Night Driver. And I was like, okay, we're pitching our tent here, this is going really well. And then we did Turn This Car Around. So it's interesting that the first two songs recorded were the most explicitly driving songs. It really sets up the album thematically, doesn't it? This is another song from Highway Companion that was never played live, and as I talked about on the introductory episode to The Last DJ, I'd have loved to have seen or heard a complete front-to-back performance of this entire album. I think that The Last DJ, Highway Companion, Mojo, and Hypnotic Eye would have been amazing records to see in their entirety in that more, intimate or sort of slightly smaller fan club type setting. This one starts with a very languid groove. We have drums, bass, and guitars all coming in right at the top. It's a really nice, loose drum groove with Tom throwing in some accents on the even-numbered bars. And it's a super cool, sloppy-sounding snare too. It almost sounds like he's playing with brushes instead of sticks there. Or maybe he's played it with sticks and brushes and they've blended that or something. So I'd love to know if that's the case, if anyone knows. And I've been sharing Tim Bullman's fantastic tutorial videos this season from his Judge Timbers YouTube channel. And to be honest, I haven't even been bothering to look at the tab anymore because Tim lays out all the chords so perfectly. And as he points out, this song is a 2-chord progression for most of its run. It's that gorgeous A7 sus4 to A7, and it's over top of an E and an A on the bass, but in that alternating pattern throughout this intro. And it gives the song a slight tension or mystery that isn't resolved until the chorus. We never get to that root chord until the B section. More on that later. After 4 bars of this alternating progression, that fantastic soulful electric piano comes in, and it was something of a surprise for me to learn that it was Tom playing that. I guess all those years of hanging around with the genius that is Ben Montench clued him in to how to play this type of part for this type of song. It's a melodic hook right at the top that gives the song its signature sound and feel. The acoustic guitars are just strumming the time over that wonderful drum groove, and the bass is playing an alternating E and A pattern, as I said, to add to that suspended feel, but it's all dialed back to allow that piano part to shine more brightly and have the impact that it does, leading us into the first verse. The first verse keeps us in that steady, unhurried groove, and Tom is singing in that clean, high register that he uses on songs like Wildflowers or Angel Dream. In the second verse, there's something else added very subtly into the mix, which maybe it's a keyboard, and I think it is keyboard. I mean, it's possibly electric guitar, but I think it's keyboard. And it's just the chords on the first beat of each bar, and it's very barely discernible, and it'll come a little bit further forward later on after the solo. But again, to that extent, I'm not 100% sure that it's just my brain playing tricks on me, because I hear that keyboard later. I don't know if it's just inserting it here, but it feels like this second verse is building into the chorus. Before we get to the chorus, though, we get that fantastic little dirty, distorted guitar lick that takes us in. And the chorus is a very simple 2-line idea. Night driver, drifting home again. Not driving home again, not heading home again, drifting. So there's a sense of listlessness there almost. It's followed by that fantastic little electric piano lick and that 5-note guitar part before repeating. The drums switch to a straight backbeat here, and the vocal in this section is doubled to give it a very dreamlike quality as the chord progression follows a straight G to D to A. So this is a fun little trick Tom is playing with the key here. You feel like this song is in A, as first off, that's where the chorus lands, and those A7 and A7 sus4 chords are hanging around in the same neighborhood, but G isn't one of the chords in the key of A major. So we do have sort of 2 options to try and explain this. In A major, G is what's known as a borrowed chord. It's actually the flat 7th, so it doesn't exactly belong. But if you think of that G to D to A progression, if the song were in D major, then it would be a 4-1-5 pattern, and it would mean that the key would be D major. Now, with the tonal center of the song being in A, it muddies the waters, but in my head and to my ear, I always think of that D chord in the chorus being the root chord and the rest of the song being intentionally elusive and never resting on its root to give that sense of time passing on this journey that we're on. Any way you theorize it, it's a wonderfully simple but incredibly effective way of going about this one structurally. The third and fourth verse sections proceed as before with no build or addition, and the second chorus is almost the same, save for the addition of a harmony vocal part, which I think Tom is performing rather than being Jeff. It's a very slight build to push us into the guitar solo. And the solo section in this one is yet another example, and I hope you don't get sick of me saying this, but it's another example of something we simply haven't heard before on a Heartbreaker song. Mike is applying a really heavy vibrato with his fretting hand, and almost every note is plucked, other than a few bends in the back half. So with that very heavy strike of the pick on the strings, it's crystal clear, and it gives this solo section a very, very distinctive, very unusual feel. Because the rest of the song is so mellow and melodically clean, this section really cuts through and almost feels like it's almost representing a song on the radio that the night driver might be listening to. It almost has a jazzy quality to it that contradicts the simplicity of that 2-chord progression. Alright folks, it's time for some petty trivia. Your question from last episode was this: what percentage of the 160 songs I've covered so far on the podcast have received the top score of 10 out of 10? And that was before Big Weekend, obviously. Is it A, 10%, B, 20%, C, 30%, or D, 40%? Well, your answer is C, 30%. Now, is that too many? There are those that might argue that no artist can have that many songs in their catalogue that can justify a perfect score. But hey, I say pish and also tish to those people. These are just my opinions, and if you don't like them, to paraphrase Groucho Marx, well, I have others. The breakdown of the 10 out of 10s per album is as follows. So, on the debut, 2 10 out of 10s. You're going to get it 1, Damn the Torpedoes 4, Hard Promises 5, Long After Dark 1, which I may have to revisit, Southern Accents 3, Let Me Up I've Had Enough 0. Full Moon Fever 3, Into the Great Wide Open 3, A Greatest Hits 1, but I only did 2 songs from there. Wildflowers 9, She's the One 2, or depending on how you look at it, 4, because, both versions of Walls, both versions of Angel Dream, I think, are 10s. Echo 4, The Last DJ 6, and Highway Companion 3 so far, plus the one from last week's episode. So, your question for this week takes us back to our road theme, and it's simply this. Dead End Street was a top 10 UK single for which iconic British invasion band? Is it A, The Kinks, B, The Who, C, the Dave Clark 5, or D, the Rolling Stones? Okay, back to the song. As we come out of the solo, back into the next verse, the bass and drums are stripped back to a simple side stick count on the rim of the snare, with the acoustic guitars being left bare. Underneath, you can hear that swirling, reverb-heavy keyboard pad, adding that ethereal texture to this verse before the bass comes in, playing staccato, 8th notes. And I do wonder, now, I guess this is what I was talking about, with that keyboard part in this section, I wonder if that's what I think I'm hearing in that, that earlier section. The last verse reverts back to the usual arrangement before the last chorus takes us out into a wonderful false ending. After this pass-through, Tom sings Home Again, and we land on that D chord, and this is at least partially why I'd contend that the song is in D, not A. But rather than end the song there, we're not quite done. We get another first in a Tom Petty song, a bass lead. Tom tells Paul Zollo, with a bass, even knowing how long to let a note ring is so important. It's not just that you hit the right note, it's how long you let that note ring. And where did you cut it off? He, talking about Jeff Lynne, is just a genius at that. He's so good at that. He plays that great bass solo at one point too. When Paul mentions this bass solo, Tom tells him, he said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off on that." And I said, "No, we're keeping that." He said, "Really? I thought maybe I was being overindulgent." Yet again though, for me, this is a brilliant example of why these guys are at the very top of the tree when it comes to songwriting. In a simple song like Night Driver, a bass solo works, or a bass lead part works, exactly because it isn't indulgent. It's the perfect final musical accent in an otherwise uncluttered and roomy arrangement. Mike adds a little more lead guitar, and the electric piano plays off it before we end on that big expensive A7 sus2 chord to finish. And I had a question here for Tim and the other guitar players. Is that the same chord that Tom uses as the false ending in Too Good to Be True? Because it sure sounds like it to me. Lyrically, I find this one, as I frequently do, absolutely fascinating. I love that opening line, "There's a shadow on the moon tonight." I love that it's used again during the conclusion of the last verse. That alone is such a strong image, and it sets up the scene perfectly. And like Too Good to Be True, you really do feel the Pacific Coast Highway before Tom even explicitly name-checks it in that last verse section. And because the chord progression never really resolves, you never feel like you arrive at your destination musically, and lyrically, again, we're treated to a sort of non-linear narrative, or partially non-linear narrative. Tom pulls off one of his favourite tricks by giving us different settings or scenes within the overall vibe of the lyric in the different verse sections. The first 2 verses set up the idea of driving and movement and being out on the highway, headlights in my eyes, fighting sleep with windows down. It's a feeling I'm sure all of us are familiar with. In the second verse, though, it becomes a bit more opaque. We start out with a pen picture of the person he's singing to. "You offered up no history when you blew into town. You remain a mystery, no information found." But then we get a much less clear musing. "I speed dial the judgment call. The near miss hits the ground. The new king hides behind the throne, refusing to be crowned." That last line is absolutely sensational, and you wonder if there's a sort of philosophical connection here back to the king in It's Good to Be King from Wildflowers. There's reluctance from this king now. It might not be good to be a king, even if just for a while. It does feel disconnected from the rest of the lyrical theme of the song, and yet, because of that languidity to the piece that I talked about earlier, it fits as almost a flashback, or maybe a flash forward, or a sort of side-of-the-road vignette as we move on by. It could even just be the tired driver daydreaming while the headlights hit his eyes. In the third verse, though, we're snapped back to clarity and placed geographically. High tide rumbles, PCH, my tyres losing tread. Helicopter circling, white beam overhead. Very clearly visual, very cinematic, and before we end on another passing notion that feels more like an intellectual journey rather than the physical one that the narrator has been on for most of the song. Now I sit and count the days and try to fill my time. There's a shadow on the moon tonight. The dollar gets a dime. Okay, what the heck does that mean? The dollar gets a dime. Is Tom talking about how we can feel like we get little in return these days? We spend $1 and only get a dime back. Is that what it means? I mean, does it actually matter what it means? I suspect that that's a phrase that was written in Tom's lyrics notebook looking for a home, and he felt it would be a wonderfully abstract way to end this song. And for me, it is the perfect way to close out the verse portion. And I've talked so much during the run of this podcast about economy and simplicity being such a strong suit that Tom had in his arsenal. It's incredibly difficult to remember to keep things simple sometimes, but Tom mastered that art without ever allowing economy or simplicity to become boring or unimaginative. And Night Driver is such a great example of this. The guitar lick, the electric piano, that 4-bar dropout, and the false ending all add very gentle accents to a song that is otherwise very happy to sit inside itself and not shoot for the moon. It's a near-perfect cruising song, and you can see why this album came together thematically for Tom as he was writing it. Okay, Pettyheads, that's it for this week. Night Driver is one of those perfect album tracks that you always want to hear on great records. There's something to be said for albums where any song could basically be a single, but I do tend to gravitate more towards albums that are very carefully curated around a central idea, and Highway Companion is definitely one of those. This track sits on the second half of the record, coming after the euphoric Big Weekend, as a mood piece and a moment in time for the central character on the album. It's a wonderfully restrained and melodically comfortable song, and I'm giving it a very strong 7 out of 10. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Boneless Podcasting Network, which is a loose collective of podcasting friends and acquaintances brought together and championed by the inimitable Chaz Charles. Go check out the roster by clicking on the link in the episode notes, and you can check out my other podcasts, which are also part of the network, Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I do with my very best friend Randy Woods, who performs all the music that you hear in this podcast. He also performed and composed the podcast theme, and generally, he's just a great guy. You can also check out the Ultimate Catalog Classic I co-host with my very good pal Corey Morissette. We are now finished with Blondie and moving on to In Excess. That's going to be a lot of fun. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project, and on Blue Sky at Tom Petty Project. Go follow, like, subscribe, do all those things, and please do leave a review or a rating if you haven't done that already. Keep talking to me on social media, and I'll keep reading out as many of your comments as I can. As your weekly reminder, The Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way, so when you're looking for Tom's music, please visit official streaming platforms, or better yet, go to your local independent record seller and grab some physical media. Go support your local businesses. If you're looking for official merch, please go to store.tompetty.com. And if you're looking for merch for this show, you can go to store.tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook. And don't forget to check out the Jake Thistle Fans Forever Facebook group if you're into Jake's music. Lastly, make sure you're listening to Tom Petty Radio on Channel 31 on Sirius XM. So until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week to talk about the 8th track on Highway Companion, Damaged by Love. Bye-bye.